They say Ned Stark died a traitor, that his silence betrayed a king, but few know the truth, that silence was his mercy. And when he finally broke it, he broke the realm too. It started on a cold morning in Winterfell, barely a week after Robert Baratheon had left the north. The royal entourage had taken their wine, their secrets, and their stink of power back with them to King's Landing. Ned sat alone in the godswood, the cold seeping through the stone bench beneath him. Jon had just turned 15, a boy still, but not for long. The boy found him there, quiet and still as always, thinking he was just visiting the old gods. But Ned had been waiting for him, his face grim, not angry, not cold, just tired. That was the first sign something was wrong. "You are not my bastard," Ned said, the words tumbling out like poison from his throat. "You are Rhaegar Targaryen's son, and your mother was my sister, Lyanna." Jon stood frozen. At first he thought it was a cruel joke. Then he saw the look in Ned's eyes, that calm, steady sorrow that always meant he wasn't lying. That same look he'd worn when he beheaded that deserter in front of Bran. "Your name is not Jon Snow. It's Aegon Targaryen, the true-born son of a prince and heir to the Iron Throne." Jon laughed, or tried to, but no sound came out. His knees gave before his pride did, and he fell into the snow. Ned bent down, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "I swore an oath to your mother. I kept you hidden to protect you. But I see now ... Hiding the truth hasn't protected anyone. Not you, not my family, not the realm." And just like that, Jon's world cracked. The cold around him was nothing compared to the frost growing in his chest. All those years, every cruel look from Catelyn, every whisper behind his back, they had been lies rooted in a lie far greater. Ned told him everything. The Tower of Joy. How Arthur Dayne nearly killed him to protect the secret. How Robert would have murdered Jon in his cradle. How honor had become a prison ever since. "I should have told Robert, or no one, but I chose to carry it, and now, you must." Jon wanted to scream, to cry, to punch something, but all he could do was stare at his father, know his uncle wishing the words could be unsaid. "Why now?" he asked, voice low. "Because I'm going south. The game's already begun, and you're not a piece I see now, you're the board." Jon thought he understood then, but he didn't. Not really, not until weeks later, when word arrived that Ned Stark had been arrested in King's Landing. Accused of treason, the raven bore words no one wanted to read. And before Jon could breathe, before he could even grieve, another raven came, this one for Robb, then another for Maester Luwin. The secret Ned had buried for 15 years had not died with him. Somehow, somewhere, someone in that viper's nest of a capital had let it slip. The truth was out. Whispers first, rumors in the taverns. A bastard in the north who was not a bastard. A Targaryen in wolf's clothing. Robb called his banners, not just for justice, but now for safety. For Jon, because the boy he called brother was suddenly the biggest threat to every crown in the realm. And Jon, he stood in Winterfell's courtyard, sword in hand, watching the snow fall harder than it had in years. The weight of his true name, pressing on him like armor made of stone. He hadn't asked for a crown, but it was hunting him all the same. The raven that carried Ned Stark's death also carried the truth. It didn't take long. First whispers, then parchment sealed with fire and wax. Across Westeros, from the Red Keep to the halls of Riverrun, the word spread. Jon Snow was not Ned Stark's bastard. He was the true-born son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, and in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister read that message with trembling fingers and blood in her eyes. "They want war," she hissed, crumpling the paper as if she could crush the North with her hand, or worse, they want to crown a dragon. Joffrey sat beside her, still a boy in a crown far too large for his head. He laughed. "Let them come. I'll put the bastard's head on a spike next to his father's." Cersei's fingers twitched. "He's not a bastard," she said, voice sharp as a dagger. "That's the problem." She stormed out of the room, barely listening to her son's smug giggles. She needed her father. She needed Tywin. By the time she reached him in the solar, he had already read the letter. He was too calm, too still. "If this is true," Tywin said, setting his goblet down, "then we may have crowned the wrong boy." Cersei spun toward him. "He's a Stark. He has no claim. He's a Stark by name, but by blood." He leaned forward. If Robert had known this, he would have put a sword through the boy's chest without blinking. "And now Robert's dead," Cersei snapped. "Yes, and the boy lives. And the North is stirred." Tywin's eyes narrowed. "We must silence him, quickly, or burn the truth before it takes root." Back in Winterfell, Jon sat at the edge of the godswood, away from the banners being gathered, away from the voices rising in the great hall. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Everyone looked at him differently now. Some with awe, some with doubt, but most with fear. "Even Robb, you should have told me," Robb said, facing him with his mother's fire and his father's quiet. "Before all this, I didn't know myself until just before father left," Jon said. "I never asked for this, Robb." "No," Robb said coldly. "But it's yours now, isn't it?" Those words sank deeper than any sword. Robb, who'd grown beside him, laughed with him, bled with him, now stared at him like a stranger. Maester Luwin tried to keep the peace. The blood of the dragon is dangerous in these times. The Lannisters will not tolerate a Targaryen in the north, nor will the south. Sansa didn't speak to him. Arya couldn't look him in the eyes. Catelyn wouldn't even stay in the same room. Her coldness, once veiled, now sat proudly on. Her face, as if she'd been waiting all these years for a reason to cast him out completely. And Jon, burdened with a truth he never wanted, began to understand why Ned had stayed silent. The North was torn. Half the bannermen whispered that he should go to Dragonstone and claim his birthright. The other half said he should be sent to the Wall and forgotten before his presence brought fire and blood to their doorsteps. But it was Theon Greyjoy who said what others feared to speak aloud. "You're not a Stark, Jon. You never were. You were just wearing their name like a borrowed cloak. Now it's come off, and people see the fire beneath." Jon punched him in the mouth, hard. Theon spat blood and grinned. "Truth hurts, doesn't it, Targaryen?" The next morning, ravens flew from Winterfell in all directions, some pleading for support, others warning of a threat reborn. Jon watched one take flight and disappear into the grey sky, carrying his name far from home. Aegon Targaryen, a name he still couldn't say out loud. The Lannisters would come. He knew that now. But the danger wasn't just in the south. It was in Winterfell too, and the Starks' family were beginning to treat him like a dragon among wolves. It began with the burning of ravens. Lord Tywin Lannister made it clear to every noble house in the Reach, the Riverlands, and the Stormlands: any lord who speaks the name Aegon Targaryen shall answer for treason. But the ravens kept flying, not just from Winterfell, but from Dawn, from the Vale, even from Old Town. The story had found its way into the cracks of the kingdom, spreading like wildfire, and the people remembered. They remembered Rhaegar. Some called him a kidnapper, a traitor, but others remembered him as the last noble prince before madness swallowed the throne. They remembered Lyanna Stark, the Wolf Maiden of the North, and her disappearance. Now, with Jon's name attached to them both, the legend felt real again. A dragon reborn in the snow, they whispered in the streets. A prince raised in the cold, with fire in his veins. In Winterfell, Jon became a symbol and a danger. The castle felt colder with every passing day. Sansa refused to sit near him. Catelyn had stopped speaking to him altogether. Arya still snuck into his chambers late at night to talk, to cry, to cling to some version of the brother she once knew, but even she was changing. "I don't care who your father was," she told him one night, her voice breaking. "You're still Jon to me. But ... they don't see that, do they?" "No," Jon whispered. "They see a threat." Even Robb, who tried to hold things together, had begun to unravel. Every council meeting, every war table, the tension between them built like storm clouds. "What are you saying?" Jon asked him once, when Robb tried to argue for sending him to the wall. "I'm saying if they come for you, I won't let the North burn for a name." Robb didn't look at him when he said it. "Even if that name is yours." And that's when Jon knew he wasn't just unwanted, he was alone. "Until the night came," said Barristan, Selmy silver-haired, cloaked in white, old but proud. He rode through Winterfell's gates under the sigil of a broken dragon with a crown of rubies, alone, unarmed, and no one could stop him. Jon met him in the hall, where the old knight knelt. "I served your grandfather, Aerys. I served your father, Rhaegar. I failed them both. Let me serve you now, Aegon Targaryen." The hall fell silent. Even the air stood still. Robb slammed his fist on the table. "He's not a king. He is what the realm fears," Selmy said calmly. "And what it might need." That same night, a second raven arrived. From Dawn. Prince Doran offered alliance, shelter, legitimacy. "We knew of your mother's love," the letter read. "And if you are her son, then you are not a threat to Usbert, a promise fulfilled." Robb nearly tore it in half. "Are you going to answer that?" he asked Jon, voice low with something darker than anger. "Are you going to ride south and crown yourself like some usurper?" "I didn't ask for this crown," Jon said through clenched teeth. "I didn't even ask for the truth." "You didn't have to," Robb snapped. "It came for us anyway." Later that night, Jon stood at the ramparts, staring out over the snowy woods. And Catelyn found him. For the first time in weeks, she spoke, but not with malice, with a calm, icy dread. "I hated you because you were the one lie my husband never explained," she said. "Now I see, you were the truth he was most afraid of." Jon didn't reply. He couldn't. "I don't care if you're the son of a prince or the ghost of a king," she whispered. "You'll tear this family apart, not because you want to, but because you exist." The next morning, Jon was gone. He left before dawn. With Ghost, with Seer Barristan, with no banners, no crown, no army. Just the truth he never asked for and a fire he couldn't put out. Jon has left Winterfell, but the South is watching, and so are the shadows. The road south was colder than Jon expected, not by weather, but by silence. He didn't speak much, Neither did Seer Barristan. Ghost padded alongside them, always alert, always tense. The knight rode with the patience of an old man who had already lived through one war too many. But even Barristan looked over his shoulder now and then. "You're being hunted," he said simply on the third night, "by men who carry crowns in their eyes and knives in their smiles." Jon knew that already. Every tree looked like a hiding place. Every village looked like a trap. Tywin Lannister had placed a bounty, 10,000 gold dragons for the head of the boy who dared carry the name Aegon, and not just any boy, a boy raised by wolves. That made him dangerous to both sides. When they reached the Crossroads Inn, Jon saw the change firsthand. The common room hushed the moment he walked in. Dirty cloaks, broken men, sellswords with scarred cheeks, they all turned to look, not at the sword on his hip, but the black curls and stark face. "You're far from the wall, aren't you, Snow?" one of them muttered. Jon didn't answer. He'd just met the man's eyes until he looked away. The innkeeper gave them food without asking questions. But as they ate, Jon noticed a hooded figure across the room watching them without blinking. It wasn't until they left that night, under cover of fog, that she followed. They were halfway down the road when she appeared, stepping out from the trees. "You should be dead," she said. "And if the Lannisters find you first, you will be." Jon reached for his sword. "Don't bother," she said. "If I meant you harm, you'd already be bleeding." Barristan stepped between them, hand on his hilt. She pulled back her hood. Red hair, sharp eyes, armor too fine for a sellsword. "I'm Ygritte, from Riverrun, or what's left of it. You know who you are, boy, but do you know what you mean?" Jon didn't answer. "You're not just some dragon's heir," she said. "You're a crack in the wall they built." And cracks spread. She wasn't alone. That night, around the fire, more came. Quiet rebels, broken knights, even a few old Targaryen loyalists, people who had been hiding in the ashes of Robert's rebellion, waiting for something to rise. They called themselves the Scorched, burned by war, scarred by peace, united only by the idea that the wrong kings had ruled too long. And now they had a symbol. "You're not ready to lead," Ygritte told him, "but you don't have a choice anymore. The moment you left Winterfell, you stepped into history." Jon didn't feel like history. He felt cold. He felt hunted. He felt tired. But the Scorched didn't care. They followed, because in him they saw the end of the lie that Robert Baratheon built, the end of Lannister gold and false peace. By the time Jon reached the borders of the Riverlands, he had over 20 riders with him. He tried to stay hidden, but that hope died when the Raven came. A message sealed in ice and blood. Robb Stark had declared war, not just against the South but against anyone who claimed Jon's cause. "The North will not bleed for a dragon," the message said. "Let him find his fire elsewhere." Jon read it twice, 3 times. He didn't cry, but the part of him that still called Winterfell home cracked. Seer Barristan looked at him. "Do you still wish to go on?" Jon nodded once. "If I stop now, everything Father died for means nothing." The next day, they crossed into the Riverlands and into a war no one wanted. Not for glory, not for thrones, but for truth, the most dangerous weapon in all of Westeros. By the time Jon and the Scorched reached the ruins of Summerhall, the war had already begun without them. Villages burned in the Riverlands. Lannister troops rode through towns with red banners and blacklists, and every tavern wall, every tree, along the roads bore the same warning: "The Targaryen boy lives. Kill him, and be rewarded. But something stranger began to happen too. In the shadows, people began protecting him. Farmers lied about seeing riders. A blacksmith near Harrenhal gave a boy with dark curls and a direwolf free horseshoes without a word. A septon refused to bless a marriage until the groom swore to never raise a sword against the dragon raised by wolves. In John, they didn't just see royal blood, they saw hope wrapped in tragedy. But John didn't feel like hope. He felt like a mistake, dragging more people toward death. At Summerhall, the place where Rager had been born and where his dreams died in fire, John found only ash and wind. Nothing noble, no answers, just bones, broken stones, scorched earth, and a girl waiting for him by the last wall still standing. Dark hair, violet eyes, not older than him, but eyes that had already seen more. Aegon, she called him. Not John, not Snow. My name is Denys, she said. Of the Black Line, he'd heard the whispers before. A hidden Targaryen bloodline buried in Essos, a girl raised by loyalists. Some said she was a pretender. Others called her the last ember of House Targaryen. I didn't come to fight you, she said, voice calm like snow falling on fire. I came to see the boy who carries my uncle's name. They talked long into the night, surrounded by ghosts and ashes. She spoke of visions, of dragons sleeping beneath the mountains, of prophecies and betrayal. She called him the Second Flame. John didn't want any of it. I'm not a prince, he said. I'm not a king. I'm just a name people keep dying for. She studied him, then offered her hand. Then let's make sure it means something. But trust came slow, too slow, because just 2 days later, Seer Barristan was dead, poisoned by someone in their own camp. A traitor, a warning. John watched the old knight's body burn, his face tight with rage. The scorched split that night, some swearing loyalty, others vanishing into the hills, and still John pressed on. He led what was left south, past the Black Water, past broken roads, toward Dragonstone, and it was there, on that haunted island, that everything changed. Waiting for him were old enemies, former allies, and fire. Melisandre, the Red Woman, stood atop the cliffs, her eyes burning with knowledge no one asked for. You were forged in snow, she whispered, but you were born of fire. She had known all along. John demanded answers. She gave only riddles. There is no such thing as one true king, she said. Only the one the fire chooses to keep alive. Below the castle, in a long-forgotten chamber beneath the stone, John found it, the egg, one unhatched, warm to the touch. Denys gasped when she saw it. Melisandre smiled. John just stared, silent, tired. I don't want this, he said. But it wants you, Melisandre whispered. By then war horns were already sounding again. Robb's bannermen had crossed into the Crownlands. The Lannisters were marching north, and somewhere between those two fires, John stood. No army, no banners, just one name, Aegon. And for the first time, he said it out loud, not as a claim, not as a boast, but as a curse, because his father, his true father, had died for a dream, and his uncle had died trying to bury it. Now it lived in him, whether he wanted it or not.